welcome to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to being well-informed on, well, sometimes surprising topics. Today we're plunging into something really unique. It actually started from a pretty unexpected place.
Yeah, it was this conversation between a poker player and his coach. Just a casual check-in, supposedly.
Exactly, but it quickly spiraled into this really deep philosophical exploration. So our mission for this deep dive is to pull out the most compelling bits from excerpts from poker, philosophy, and life's deeper game.
And that itself comes from a video, right? Poker, philosophy, and writing. A deep reflection with my coach.
Right. We're going to unpack how these thoughts on, writing, society, human nature, how they offer clarity on some big questions.
Questions about living a thoughtful life, basically. A deliberate one.
Let's dive in. Okay, so our journey kicks off with the author talking about his book. It's self-published.
Mm-hmm. In French and English already, and German's coming soon, he mentioned.
What really jumped out at me first was his insistence on, 100% full authorship.
Yeah, he's very clear. He did the writing, the editing, the translation, all of it himself.
But here's where it gets interesting. He did use AI tools.
Right, but only for editing. He draws a sharp line there.
He's adamant that the creative spark, the intellectual heavy lifting, that was all human, all him.
And he reads it every day with those, what did he call them? Soul reader glasses.
Yeah, which just shows how incredibly personal this text is for him. It's like spiritual guidance.
It really makes you think about authorship now, doesn't it, with AI in the mix?
How do we define it?
Well, his stance highlights that difference between AI assistance and genuine human creation. It underscores the value of that, authentic, singular effort.
And that deep personal connection, it seems like it fuels his wider critique of society. Yeah. What's his take on how people engage with deeper ideas?
He basically believes most people lean towards comfort, luxury, maybe superficial things.
Instead of growth or courage, philosophical stuff.
Exactly. He kind of expects his work won't ever be mainstream because of that pervasive disinterest in depth.
That sounds a bit lonely, existentially speaking.
It really does. It echoes thinkers like Nietzsche or Kierkegaard, doesn't it? Lamenting that mass preference for ease.
Right.
And for him, philosophy isn't some academic exercise locked away in a university.
No. It's daily practice. He reads his own book twice a day for spiritual guidance.
Which is fascinating, and it leads to his view on academia.
Yeah, he has this clear disdain for it, even though he's obviously a learner. 2,300 videos he's made.
It seems like a clash, right? Authenticity versus maybe conformity.
Is that it? A call for self-education, maybe? Philosophical independence?
I think so. Rejecting the formal structures for a more direct personal path. He even jokes about this social experiment.
Oh, yeah, going out on the street.
Presenting deep thoughts and asking strangers to, approve or reject them.
And he predicts rejection, mostly.
He does, which reflects how, superficiality can sometimes dominate the public sphere.
So it's a critique, but also kind of a parody of YouTube culture.
Yeah.
Or just online reactions in general.
Yeah, maybe both. It highlights that feeling of alienation a thinker might have when deep reasoning isn't really valued by the crowd.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. From the intellectual to the emotional. There was that moment. The coach praised him.
Yes. For admitting he felt irritated.
Instead of just saying, I'm fine. Which, let's be honest, we all do sometimes.
You do, and philosophically, that's huge. That self-awareness of your actual emotional state, it's the starting point for growth.
Like Stoicism or Buddhism. You have to know where you are to change.
Precisely. You need to know the state to work with it. And this awareness leads him to another key idea.
The metaphor about destruction.
Yes. That it's just so much easier to destroy something than it is to create it.
He tells that story, doesn't he? About meeting someone from the punk or anarchist scene.
Mm-hmm. Someone who sabotages logging machines as rebellion.
And it just hits home how simple it is to cause harm versus the massive effort it takes to build something or fix it.
So what does that tell us, bigger picture? About civilization, maybe?
Oh, it really serves as an allegory, doesn't it? For how fragile things are. Social systems, moral codes.
It takes so much work to build them up. Collective effort, time.
And then one person, maybe acting irrationally, can just undermine it all so easily.
It's a sobering thought. And this idea of fragility, it feeds directly into his critique of governance.
Right. He really pushed back against that common argument. We have to accept the system. It's the lesser evil.
He has a very different take. Quite radical, actually.
He thinks the danger only really starts when you get formal governance, legal structures.
Yes. Not in, spontaneous living. He sees government itself as the source of coercion, not the solution to chaos.
Wow. Okay, that's...
Deeply anarchist political theory right there. The idea that centralized authority creates the problems and freedom isn't inherently the danger.
And this connects to the island thought experiment.
Directly. It apparently inspired a new bit in his fifth book. The core idea is simple. Take a perfect island community.
Paradise, basically.
Right. Could one malicious person ruin it all?
And his answer is...
Counterintuitive. He argues that without government structures in place, the potential for that one person to cause widespread systemic destruction is actually lower.
Okay, this is really reminding me of that classic debate. Hobbes versus Rousseau.
Absolutely. Hobbes saying life without government is nasty, brutish, and short.
While Rousseau believed people are naturally good, and it's government that corrupts, our author is definitely leaning Rousseau here.
Clearly. And you can see how that perspective then leads straight into his critique of war.
He argues that political leaders, well, they desire war, not just for geopolitical reasons.
That's his point. He thinks war is useful to them. It lets them justify their power.
Demand loyalty.
Increase debt. Control the narrative.
So war becomes a tool of control, more than just a necessity.
Exactly. It really echoes what Smedley Butler said in War is a Racket. That war isn't always defensive. Sometimes it's about consolidating power and profit for elites.
It suggests that what looks like necessity might actually be, well, manipulation.
A powerful instrument for those at the top.
Wow. What a journey we've taken today, seriously.
You really covered some ground.
From personal authorship and that human-AI blend to critiques of society's shallowness, creation versus destruction.
And those challenging views on government and war.
It really felt like a philosophical symposium just hiding inside a poker check-in.
It shows how deep insights can pop up anywhere, really, even in everyday chats.
So we've touched on some profound ideas. The human spirit, what society values, the structures of power. And given that discussion, about depth being avoided and how easy destruction is compared to creation, makes you think. What small act, maybe a philosophical rebellion in your own life or some small act of authentic creation, what might you consider today that truly reflects your own deeper values, something to mull over?
Welcome. I'm waiting for my poker coach. I don't know what we're gonna talk about exactly, but I guess we look at some hands and talk about my decision during my poker play. And before that, I want to talk about my last book. So this is the French version of my last book. I have to translate it into German. But you must understand, I did all the work, 100% of the work. And nobody on earth did one single thing for me. That's a lot of work. And I'm very lucky because with artificial intelligence, you can edit your book, which helps a lot. But still, it's an immense amount of work. Now, for me, that's very important because this book is really, really important to me. That's why I publish it. Okay, I'll never be famous because people are not interested in learning, in improving, in getting a better life, in being more courageous. They don't care about that. They just want luxuries and softness. And they don't give a crap about any philosophy apart the philosophy they like, which is always very easy stuff and without any difficulties and so on. Smooth sailing and fun. Anyways, I still managed to translate it. So I did write it in French and I did translate it in English. And I hope that one day I'll find enough time to translate it in German, since those are the three languages I speak. Now, why is this book important? Okay, you find the link in the description. This book is important because I read it every day. Okay, I put it on my glasses. These are the Soul Reader glasses. You can buy a pair of them, and I have no affiliate link, so I cannot give you any discount. But it is really, really, really great because I can just put those glasses on and I keep reading it. I've already read it once, the English version of the book, and I enjoy it a lot. And it helps me a lot reading my book. I don't like translating. I don't like working on grammar and all that stuff. I don't find that interesting, but I find the philosophy itself very, very interesting. So for me, that's awesome. At least twice, if not more a day, I just put them on and I read 30 minutes my book because I enjoy it that much. I appreciate it that much and it does me so much good regarding my soul. It helps me facing life. I play poker, but as you can see, I'm not the best poker player on earth. I'm much better than a lot of poker players you will ever meet, but I'm not the best poker player on earth, and I never will be because I started too late. Okay, I wasted I wasted more than 30 years with academia. Now, there's nothing more on earth that I hate than academia and everything that's quite close to academia. Nobody likes to study as much as I do. And on my YouTube channel, I published 2.3K video. There are not a lot of YouTubers who have published that amount of videos. And they are very, very interesting. The only reason I do it is to learn, because I like learning every day. Okay? Learn new stuff. Now, with all that said, I hate academia because academia is just dulling down your brain. Now, my poker teacher is already waiting, so I have to stop talking. I'm fine. How are you?
A little bit tired and irritated.
How come?
I don't know. No, I feel good right now. But overall, I mean, today hasn't been the best day for me.
That's great. You know, it's the first time you answer that. I mean, it's not great that you're irritated, but it's great because it's the first time you answer that. Always when I asked you, you gave me a standard answer like I'm fine, everything is great. It's the first time you seem to look at your soul and you realize that not everything is always as we would like. It's the same with me. Huh? I also have a lot of struggles I have to face every day.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I think that's progress when you can realize that you're irritated or angry. That means you take a look at your inner well-being. That's good. Everybody should do it. It's the only way you can improve and have some control over your feelings. And then choose the one you would like to have and have them more of them.
yes. Yes, that's wise what you say. You're right. Yes. Yeah, I don't even have a good follow-up for it at the moment.
I did send you an interesting video that I found. And
No, another video. Yeah, full movie, right?
yeah, even a full movie. Yeah. Yeah. When you find the time to see it or give me your comments about it, it would be interesting.
Yeah, I didn't watch it yet this weekend. I was my grandpa's 79th birthday, so yeah, something like that. But yes, and it's from the same author that made your Jones Plantation movie, right?
I don't think it's the same author. I think it's just a director because the other one was from Larkin Rose and this one, I don't think it's from Larkin Rose. But it's the same director and it's around the same topic. There are some very shocking passages in that short film. Anyways, there are some very shocking moments in it. And I think, well, as always, there are people who will reject it all, who won't believe in it, who think it's all made up, and there are others who will find something interesting in them. I don't know how you will look at it and what you will think, but it doesn't matter. It's just interesting to talk about it. You know, last time you told me that you believe that even if there's a perfect island, if only one guy appears, he could mess it all up for everybody. A small island somewhere. And I thought that it's an interesting thought. And I did think about it. My subconscious, at least, did think about it a lot for a couple of days. And finally, I thought it through and I did write a text, maybe 5 or 10 pages long in my next book, my 5th book. And yeah, I'll answer the objection as clear as possible. And I try to explain why I don't think it's a real danger. The danger only appears, in my opinion, when you start creating a government ruling class and start creating law. But until then, I don't think it's a real issue. But I go into as much detail as I can and I try to explain my point of view or the conclusion I come to. But I found your objection interesting. And it made me create a new passage in my book. It allowed me to think it through, you know? And yeah, I'm very prolific right now. So I write a lot, really a lot. I've never written so much in such a short period of time. And I don't know if it's just an episode and then I go back to my normal writing space, which isn't every week, or if I keep writing a lot like I do right now. But that's something I cannot say. But if I keep writing as I do right now, then I would be able to publish my 5th book in 6 months. You know, it would be very fast for publishing a new book. But I don't think it will be that fast. So I still expect it will take me around 2 years. But right now I'm writing a lot. And I find it really interesting. Tomorrow I see somebody and that person always tells me, even if I'm right, it doesn't matter. because we still have to accept the system in which we are. Because according to her, it's the lesser evil. And you always have to choose the lesser evil. Okay. So I've also went through that in great depth. And I hope that tomorrow she will take a look at it and we can talk about it. So you see, philosophy is something that is around me all the time, And I thought about something also, I never will do it, but to show why people aren't interested in any philosophy. If I had a cameraman, I could go on the street, ask like 10 thoughts and ask people just if they approve or reject. And I think they would all reject them all, or nearly all. Most people would reject them. And then if they are smart enough, I would even ask them if they can comment why they reject it, And it might be a funny video, but you have to find somebody who answers the questions. And anyways, they won't say anything smart. But it would be, maybe that thing goes viral and I get like 10K views or 100K views or a million views. And then my channel would be monetized and I would make some money, But it wouldn't be very interesting. It's just a funny thing I thought about. But I'll never do it because I have no cameraman. And creating the question would be not so difficult. And asking people is not difficult. But having somebody who stops, who listens to you and gives you the answer you ask for, well, that's really hard. Anyways, what do you want to do today? I have a couple of hands marked, or we can look at a tournament, or you can play the game.
Yeah, we can start with the hands, but I'd like to share with you a little story on this we talked about last week, right? So it's to do with, if to create something very pretty and beautiful, it might take a lot of work and effort. But usually to break it down or break it is way easier.
Yep.
Right? Anything you think of.
It is easier to make than to break. You just did a little mistake.
Easier to break than to make. Yes, you're right. Sorry. I sometimes good that you pointed it out. I should be more mindful of how I say things. But so, I have a story with that. I met one person from punk movement. I guess you could call them an anarchist, maybe skinheads or something similar. I don't know how familiar you are with punk movement, but they have they're kind of like motorcycle gang outfits in a way. They have these leathery clothes with a lot of like effort put into it. And they're against the system in this way. So I met a person like that when I was out. It was like half a year ago or so. And they told me that their way of fighting against the system is during the night. They go to forests where there's these very expensive big machines that cut the forest. And then they break the machines and cause the machines thousands and tens of thousands of harm. I don't remember exactly how they do it. Maybe they could cut the tires. I think they have very big and expensive tires. That's something that they could do. Maybe they cut some wires or somehow they break those expensive machines there. And they said that was their way of rebelling or fighting the system. So they're interrupting natural flow of things, right? Someone has to now repair those machines and they can't do the work they plan to do with them. So it's like an example of how it's easier to break things than to make them. So if I guess it's just to add to my point that if some people have evil intentions to make things worse for everyone, for whatever reason, it could be mental illness, it could be their belief, it could be that they're angry or just from their childhood, some trauma or whatever the case, then if they're a little bit smart, then actually how societies works is it's not very difficult to do harm which you get no benefit from. Like you could scratch cars, paintings, for example. It will be expensive to repair that, or slash tires on cars and just like do small things like that, and or do graffiti on walls, which people do as well, right? And it takes a lot of work, a lot of money and effort to repair these things. It's just a little story I wanted to share on the complexity of having a perfect system in this way, that however nice things are, someone could still want to vandalize it or ruin it.
Yeah, I would even go a little farther than you. I would say it is easier to do evil than to do good. And I think that especially in our system, I think it's much easier to do harm than to do good. But I don't believe that's the true nature of humans. I just think we are conditioned to do that in our system because it's more interesting. I've just published a video about war mind, and that our political leaders actually want war because then they can have an enemy. They can also explain why their presence is necessary and why we have to go into more debt, spend more money, and so on, So there are a lot of reasons. I don't give them all, but there are a lot of reasons why they want war. So yeah, it's easier to do evil, It's much easier to send the never-ending bombs on Gaza than to elevate people to a higher standard of living and create a better environment. That will ask of some genius. You have to be Jack Fresco to be able to do that. But just, sending never-ending bombs and killing everybody, yeah, that's not so difficult,
Well, we'll discuss more about these topics.
No, but they're very interesting because they are of philosophical nature, And the difference with me and the person I meet tomorrow is that she always tells me that she has no respect for humanity. For her, humanity is very, very, very low. She tells me it's even lower than the level of the sea. It's extremely low. So she has no belief, no hope in humanity. Okay. And yeah, I understand that. But I don't believe that it's the true nature of a man, of a human being. It is we are only conditioned to act like this, to talk like this, to behave like this in the system we live in. I don't believe that's a standard thing in every society to every age. I really don't believe that. And she believes we are not good to the environment. She believes that we create climate. Not long ago, they called it climate warming and so on. But it's those kinds of things she thinks are really, really horrible. I actually criticize human beings much, much more in my book. I published a huge passage where I explain in detail why you cannot help another human being because they don't want any help, to make it short. But I explain it in much more detail. But I only think that is the case in our system because we are conditioned to work, behave, and act in a special way. I'm really gonna stop now because I know we want to do something else, but it reminds me of what I saw. It was the riots in England because of immigration and so on. And there was a guy to make a YouTube video. He joined one of those riots just to have some pictures to put online and make some money. That's what he didn't believe in it or he didn't participate in it, but he just wanted to get some pictures as a journalist and put it online. But then the riots turned ugly. They started destroying stuff, and and putting fire and so on. And he didn't want to participate anymore. He thought it was too dangerous and he's better off leaving now when it went so ugly. So he turned around and he left. But when he left, there was one guy from the police. He was unarmed and he didn't have even a stick. And he was walking after the people, the 5K or 50K or I don't know how many people there were. But he was walking after them. And he made a line, a somewhat imaginary line with his body. And the guy came and told him, I just make a video and I just want to go because my girlfriend is waiting in my car over there. And the police officer said, you cannot leave. And then he walked backwards because he kept walking in front. And he was very, very scared to leave. And he kept begging, please, please let me go. My girlfriend is waiting to me. I'm not a neo-Nazi and so on. I'm not a racist. Just let me go. Please, 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 please. He kept begging. Okay. And that went on until the guy who was old, he couldn't even run behind him. And why to do that? Since his job was to follow the crowd. So he could not stop and just run after one guy. And he had nothing. No handcuffs, nothing, So, but still he kept begging. And it went on until the officers finally said, okay, you can go. And then he had enough courage to cross that imaginary line, go to join his girlfriend and leave, But we are conditioned to obey authority, even if what they ask for of you is totally absurd. We will always do what they tell us. And here it's totally absurd because there's no reason why a free man cannot walk to his car, join his girlfriend and leave a place. There's no reason that should be the case. And still, just because the guy said you cannot leave, he went backwards. He didn't stand at his place. He didn't go forward, but he was going backwards and begging until the police officer finally said you can leave. And we are just conditioned to behave in that manner. Since school, let's say, because of our parents, we always believe that our authority is always right. Even if they're wrong, we have to obey. And that kind of thing that is very deep in our soul, entrenched in our soul, is very hard. You also see a lot of propaganda in the movie I recommend you. And even for me, who rejects all of that, when I see all that propaganda, I start believing it a little, I start thinking, well, maybe it's not too bad and maybe so on, So it's really easy to manipulate us and to make us do stuff we normally would never do, especially nowadays with technological progress, algorithms, and so on. And I'm sure they have even techniques they won't talk about of really creating sleeper cells and making people do atrocities. And all those atrocities are never good for the person who do it. They're never good for anyone. They only serve the state because the state can get more power out of them. So it's a very dangerous and perverse system we live in. But let's stop here. Any comments on that, or can we jump straight to my hands?
Yes, I get the point of what you said, how are these imaginary lines and how we are obeying the laws in that way. But I would bring up another point, which is you actually made an example why a lot of people don't like change or don't like revolutions or new way of things, because you brought out how this protesting turned into vandalizing very quickly. And that happens very often, that people come to the streets for something noble, even something bad has happened, and they want justice for it, they want change for it. But then the next moment they're lighting cars on fire or breaking into stores or just making things actually even worse. That you could even say they cause more harm than the issue they want solved. So I think that's also a problem. I think there would be more people who would support protests or movements like that, but it can be off-putting if people start by coming to the street for something good and then next moment you see they're just vandalizing. What do you think about that?
I think you're correct up to a certain extent. Now, the system is so perverse that those protests are not entirely happening on their own. For example, the immigration riots and the riots in Los Angeles, as far as I know, are pro-immigration. Well, it's Soros, and he's a billionaire. And there are two persons, it's a couple, okay? And they got from him like 100 million. And one of them now has 70 million just for organizing those riots, So you must understand that it is not something that happens totally spontaneous. It's the same thing when women started smoking. They also did create the entire movement that didn't exist. No woman wanted to start smoking like a fireman, That didn't happen spontaneously. But they realized that they can make a lot of money. So they took top models walking down the streets and lighting cigarettes and saying it's the freedom torch. And that was very well meditated, and it was in all the news, and they started talking about feminism and all that, and then changed their behavior and wanted to smoke because they thought it would give them some freedom. But before that, they were never interested in it. So people get manipulated into acting a certain way. And we have think tanks and so on, who their job is to create a narrative and make stuff happen. So it's not entirely spontaneous and it's not entirely honest. There might be an incident, but they exploit it. It's a very dark picture, unfortunately. And most people don't want to hear that.
Yeah, can you see how like the fresco project or things like that, people could be skeptical about those, thinking that what if Soros also starts a project like that, where his actual goal isn't to create utopia, but is to create dystopia which they would control.
It's really, really funny that you talk about that, because one of my last passages I created, I talked about Jack Fosco, the project, and also how a lot of people will use that platform just to get more power and just to get personal benefit out of it. And I cite the guy, you watched a video of him, Peter Joseph. Peter Joseph, you watched one of his videos and you found it interesting. Yeah, because he brings up interesting topics. But he's the example of somebody who will exploit the ideas from Jack Fresco and change them a little and make sure that he'll benefit a lot out of it. And he will give bad advice to his followers. Like, for example, never invest in the markets, never buy some Bitcoin, and so on. While not realizing that in the world we live, we have to use the tools around us to make our life a little better. And there's nothing that can give more hope to humanity than giving back some power to the people. And the only technology that does that is Bitcoin. So I told him that, Peter Joseph, and you know what he did straight away? He banned me just because my opinion was divergent from his. And I did it in a very polite and very nice manner, but he instantly banned me. So if you do not think exactly like the head of the guru, the head, the messiah, then you get banned. And that shows you that those people, yeah, I mean, why is just a personality that is on Wikipedia and so on? Because he got famous. He made a video criticizing the system after meeting Jack Fresco, and that thing went viral. And now he's a personality, and he can keep on making videos, and he makes 100K or 500K views, and he can monetize his status of a personality, But his goals aren't the same as Jack Fresco. Jack Fresco had very noble intent, but not everybody is at the same level. So yes, it's dangerous. It's dangerous that people can corrupt something and change totally the rules of the game. But the only thing you can do is try to explain people to have some critical thinking. Then they won't fall in the trap, Then they will realize that it's not normal, that somebody is banning you just because your opinion is slightly different than his. If people get some critical thinking, and you can learn that. We don't learn critical thinking, we teach the opposite. We teach only to obey authority and never ask question, never ask question, never ask why, don't you see that's stupid, or don't you see that's cruel, that's inhumane? You can never say such things. You only have to obey, okay? But that's one system. You can also create people who have a lot of critical thinking and a lot of capability of analyzing stuff and rejecting stuff that if you look at it and you are not totally dulled down by the system, not totally stupid, you will realize that they are evil. So there's hope. It's just that if you just want some bunnies and flowers and what's the thing called? Rainbows and unicorns. If that's the only thing you accept in life and you cannot see evil in the face, because there's a lot of evil on this earth, well, then I'm sorry, things won't get better. There's a moment you have to realize who the enemy is. And you have to stop obeying them and stop acting just as they want you to act. There's a moment you have to take a distance. And the solution is very easy. It's not difficult. The song I gave you says it in a very small and condensed manner. They say, just learn to say no. It is the only way. If people only get that, everything would change in a very, very short period of time. No?
Yes, okay, all right.
Did I bore you, or was I too long, or did you find it annoying?
People saying no, I think people are so ingrained in the system, right, that they're not they've given away their freedom to say no. I would say like this, most people have a lot of responsibility, so they can't really say no. Because if they did, then they would be worried that they would lose their job, or tying them to the system, right? Or the policeman come and arrest them, or so.
I know. I agree 100% with what you say. And I do not underestimate the consequences of saying no. That's not what I do. But we live in an age where you can organize online. And there's an easy example for it. Just say people don't want to pay income taxes anymore. And 10 or 20% of the people say, okay, next time we don't pay. We just don't fill the documents and we won't pay. The system, the legal system would be overwhelmed and they wouldn't be able to prosecute and put all those people in jail. And they will just say then, well, okay, we have 10% or 20% of the population who doesn't pay anymore. And there's nothing we can do. We don't have enough jails. We cannot sanction them. There's nothing we can do. So it is not mandatory, but we ask you to contribute. And then the rest of the 80% will say, okay, forget it. I know it's a scam. I don't want to send any more money to Israel and I'm not participating in it. And then it stops. So there's a way of doing it. And they have power, but it's not illimited. Now, I also know the bad side of it. That, I mean, the thing is, they have something that can be used to an extreme, and you see it in North Korea. It's called violence, Why is there no revolt in North Korea? It happened once or twice. There were little revolts in concentration camps. But Kim Jong-un only sends the army and kills everybody. Okay, you can do that up to a certain extent. But if too many people revolt, you cannot anymore. And it's very hard here to say, we're just going to kill everybody who didn't pay income tax. They won't get away with it, So, and then they would show the true face. So there are ways of doing it. But the issue is not that there are no ways, it's that there's no will to do it. People do not want to revolt because they like the system. As you say, they're really dependent on it. So they do not want to revolt. They think it's the best system possible. The person I see tomorrow will tell me everything you say is true, but there's an issue. The issue is that it is the lesser evil and we have to accept the lesser evil. And as long as you're convinced that it's the best system possible, you do not want to change it.
Yes.
Thank you for listening, Norman.
Good talk.
Can you see the screen?
Yes, right there.
A7 of, so I go for half pot? No, I don't. Yeah, I go for half pot. I didn't want to do an all-in. And he folds.
Yeah, this hand went well for you, right?
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that I made the best decision.
What's the main worry for us on this board?
That he has a queen or that he's on a flush draw, and in both cases he won't fold. It's possible he goes all in.
Yeah, which worries you more, a queen or a flush?
How much did he put?
The amount of your raise, right?
Okay, so yeah, he showed a lot of power. So I think the queen is more probable.
Okay, but what's stronger here, queen or a flush draw?
Flush is stronger.
Actually, no.
Why?
Well, let's say that he does have a flush draw. How often would you win this hand?
So flush draw, if I'm not mistaken, he has 9 outs. So 9 times 4 is what, 36?
Okay, but what was my question?
Your question is how much. So I would win it the opposite amount. So I would win it 36 minus 100 minus 36.
Okay. Now, in the case of them having a queen, how often would you win it then?
I would only win it if I make an ace.
Not exactly.
Or a 7.
And how often would that happen?
Not much.
So which one would you rather for them to have, a flush draw?
Flush draw.
Yes, exactly.
My probability of winning is better if he has a flush draw.
Yes, exactly. So even in that sense, a flush draw.
But he won't fold. In both cases, he won't fold.
Yes, I agree with that. But a flush draw would be a better scenario for you. So really, yeah, go ahead. You want to say something?
Yeah, the thing is, how can I know the difference? I mean, in both cases, there's a very high probability he goes all in because he's short stacked. And I have to assume that he has either one or the other one. And I don't know which one it is.
Yes, you're right in that, right? That it's very difficult to distinguish here which one they would have it. They would likely play them very similarly, but I still think it. Yeah, you wanted to say.
How do you know when I want to say something before I say it? Do you have some?
Correct, though?
Yeah, you were correct, but do you have some telepathic power that other people don't have? Is that why you're so good at poker?
Yeah, a lot of lessons, right? So
yeah. The only thing I want to say is, for example, if he only calls here and then there comes one more heart and suddenly he goes all in, then I would assume he has a flush. But until he does a move like that, I cannot know,
Yes. No, I mean, it's, why I brought it up is it's people sometimes are too afraid of a flush draw. And the flush draw is not as scary as a made hand.
I agree. Thank you.
In this situation, the queen is dangerous. You could have a bunch of king, queen, queen, jack, queen 10. But the good news is it's the only dangerous things, right? Just like you can have queen, jack, they could also have king, jack, or king 10, or jack 10, or ace 9, or many things, right? So initially, it looks like we do have the best hand here, right? That's where I wanted to get with this, that even though there's dangers here, then there's still, I would say, more likely that you have the best hand with your 7. Now, if you would go all in, you're right, that would put it in a difficult situation, because if he has a flush draw, he has pretty good chances. So you're not a very big favorite against the flush draw. But if he has a queen, then he's a big favorite, right? So it's either a 50-50 for you, or it's way better for them. So it would be a difficult situation when he goes all in. And why I say difficult is, well, on some sense, why even consider to continue if it's either a flush draw or a queen? And it's the average of those two doesn't seem too favorable for us. But the reason could be that there's already 9 in the pot. And if he goes all in, that will be for 11, out of which you only have to call 8 because you have already put 3 in the middle. So the total pot would be 20, and you would have to call 8 to win that 20, which would mean that the reward for you would be 2.5 times greater than the risk you would be taking on. So even that would put you in this scenario where it would be a close decision whether to continue or not. Yeah, in many ways, it would be very difficult to decide what to do once he goes all in, whether to gamble for it or not. But with how the hand has gone so far, I think you played it quite well in that sense, that you raise, they call, you have a 7 on this board, and that you bet to try to take this pot down here. I think that's a pretty good option that you took. So I'm not very sure what other interesting things I could say about this hand. I don't think it was a big mistake or something very bad with this hand. It's only that if you had gone all in, which didn't happen, then we would be in a very difficult situation.
Yeah, you will be in a difficult situation because of what you just told me. But I would give him the benefit of the doubt, think that I'm beat, and I would fold.
Yeah, which is not a very, very bad option in that either.
Because I hope that I get a better chance with my 12.7 left.
Yes. I mean, yes, that there's a lot of sense in that. You're right.
But I understand. I'm not good at calculating how much is in the pot and how much I have to put in, and then should I do the decision or not. I'm not good at that. But I don't do it in detail just as you did.
Yeah, I would add this detail that I think, what do you think would be more likely? That he went all in on the flop with a queen or with a flush draw? Which hand would you think more likely call your bet, and which hand more likely would go all in?
It depends what plays. At the level where I play, I think he does the obvious thing. So I think he would go with a queen. But on higher levels, he has a flush draw and he wants to represent the queen. So then he goes all in with a queen. Does that make sense? And do you think it's smart looking at it like this?
Yes, I agree with you. So a lot of people play their draws. They don't want to risk it all with a draw. Just with a draw. So a lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of people would just call with a flush draw. So that would even make it more worthwhile to fold here, as it wouldn't be a guarantee that they would do it every time with the flush draw. So I think this could be interesting for you. If this 7 was instead a jack, and let's say you had ace jack versus your ace 7. I want you to think about what would be different in those two scenarios.
First, without thinking too much of it, I would say it's the same thing. And I shouldn't be more enthusiastic about having a jack than having a 7. But if I think a little more, I think there's a possibility that I make a straight. But then again, the straight wouldn't help again against a flush. So I think it's a little better, but not much better.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, these things are correct what you said. I think the detail which is important with the distinction here is that if you had a jack, what's the bad card for you on the turn?
A heart.
Okay, but a heart, like you said, a flush draw won't fold anyway, so we cannot prevent a heart in this way, right? So if the jack also was a heart and flush draw on both boards, then there wouldn't be a difference in that. But the thing is, with a 7, any 8, 9, 10, jack, or king, even if it's not a heart, could help the opponent, right? If they have king 10 and a 10 comes, they could now make a higher pair than a 7, right?
I thought we had a jack now.
I know, but I'm trying to compare both of these options, right? So I'm gonna talk about what could happen in one case and then the other. And what would be different is if you had a jack, the only bad card that could come on the turn would be a king then.
Yeah, I get that. With a 7, a jack is very scary. But if I already have the jack is not so scary. I perfectly get that.
And also the cards between a jack and a 7, right? The 9, the 10. If you have a jack, then you're not so worried if a 10 or a 9 or an 8 comes. So why I'm saying this is the 7.
Yeah. I could be with the 7. I will lose if an 8 comes, because if he has an 8, he would have a higher pair. I get that. Yeah.
So why I'm saying this is, if you had a jack here, I think there would be more reasons to not bet, because your hand would be quite safe against other than a flush draw or a queen. And like you said yourself, we can't make a flush draw or a queen fold anyway. So if you did have a jack, then there would be a lot of sense in not betting and try to keep the pot small, and you wouldn't have to worry so much if what the turn and river cards will be. If it will be a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, all these cards would be good for you. So the concept I want to introduce you in this way is, well, it's a very common concept in poker. It's to bet for protection. And a lot of people think about betting for protection for something like a flush draw, for example. But you said it very nicely, actually, that if they have a flush draw, you cannot really protect your hand from a flush draw, as they will be not willing to fold their hand. So actually, you can only protect your hands from hands that could fold. In this case, let's say he had something like King 9. He has 2 cards that are dangerous, both the king and a 9. Could you make a king 9 fold here?
Yeah, I
think also you can. And it's worthwhile to try to do that, because king 9 has 6 outs and can hit that 9 or hit that king. But the difference would be if you had the jack here, or if you don't want to change the board, we could change the 7 to a jack. But another thing is, we can imagine you had pocket jack. Everything, the board stays the same, but you have pocket jacks. Well, that would be a case where there's less need to protect your hand, because jacks is quite a high pair. There's less worries about overcards coming, and there's more safe cards for you on the turn, like an 8, a 9, a 10. And so with these hands, you can take the safer approach in that sense. So in a way, betting is very risky. Like you said yourself, if you bet and he doesn't fold, or if he goes all in, then often you will lose that bet because they have a queen or they have a draw. They might go all in. Many things could go badly for you. But if your pair was a bit stronger, but still not the strongest, something like pocket jacks here, then you wouldn't have to protect it as much as with your 7. So why I like your bet here is because there's so many cards higher than a 7. It makes a lot of sense to try to win this spot immediately. But if your hand was a little bit safer, you had something like pocket jacks, or even if you had a weak queen, I think you would also often bet half pot, but I think it would be a pretty good idea to not bet with those hands. You would probably say it's a sneaky play or something, but I would more of think about it like you're trying to pot control, because if you have jacks, you like your hand here, but you don't want to go all in. you don't want to play a very big pot. So I really like slowing down with hands that don't need much protection.
Yeah, I get what you say. That I should do some pot control with hands that don't need much protection. It's like if I'm with a tank on a battlefield and people start attacking me. But I know that they can do very little because they can't really harm my tank. It is a tank, and they don't have the enough weapons to really, really harm it. So I don't have to overreact and make them scared. Because I just can stand their attacks. I'm strong enough to stand their attacks. But with a 7, I don't have a real big tank, and it's more dangerous. So now bluffing and making them scared is more interesting. I get it. But here's what is hard for me. So I have a queen, okay? It is not a heart. And I still feel danger because he could have a flush draw, good to have 2 hearts. So I think, then I also would like to win here instead of showing him the turn and the river, because he hits his heart. Well, then suddenly he wins and I'm not longer ahead. So I'm always scared to lose my position, actually. That's the thing. I'm always scared that what I have goes away.
Yes, and it will sometimes go away. But here's my question for you. Let's say you did have a queen and would feel scared. Would you rather see the flush draw card on the turn in a smaller pot, with you still having more chips you didn't put into the middle, or in a bigger pot, right? Because it could happen, you have a queen, you bet, they go all in. Well, you have a queen, you won't fold that queen. And now you still will see the turn and the river, and the flush might still come there. And now when it does come, you don't have the ability to walk away anymore because you're all in. So instead, however, if you don't bet, you will see the turn. If it's not a flush, then your position of a queen strengthens, but also the risk you took is lowered through that, right?
Yeah,
So
I agree.
it's to do with this concept of prevention, really, that we cannot prevent the flush draw from continuing, but what we can do is to see if the flush draw does materialize or not. And if it does materialize, then we can leave ourselves a way to walk away from the pot.
Yeah, but there's a good chance that a good player knows that. And apart from that, what is more important to me is that I'm ahead. And I think my chance of winning with a queen are much higher than his chance of making his flush. So it's a gamble I should take, don't you think so?
Well, the question is, how much are we ahead? Because if we're ahead by just 1 point or 5%, then is it really worth foregoing a 5% edge when it means 45% your tournament's over? So in that sense, yes, a queen would feel more comfortable. However, a flush draw would often have an ace or a king in it, which means they would also have 3 more outs to make a pair with that ace or a king. So they could have 12 out. They could have something like 48%. So even if you would be a favorite there, it would be by a very small margin. And it's not necessarily beneficial for you to go for a situation where you're a 2% favorite, but 48% of the time you get 5th place. So it is difficult to navigate.
Yeah. You're perfectly right. You're perfectly right with what you say. But you are taking the worst scenario to come to that conclusion. I have an app who tells me to calculate the probabilities. And I think I can give him A7 and the board and ask him what my chance of winning is. But then he thinks that he has a random hand. But he will give me something much higher,
Yes. But that's another thing, that even if we don't bet and a flush draw does come in, that doesn't necessarily mean that we will lose the hand, because the other player could have off-suited hand, could have another suited hand, they could have 2 spades. And so it's just that we shouldn't just be focused on trying to make a big pot against flush draw. That's my big point. That's not a benefit for us if we just are too focused on the flush draw. That will happen anyway. Like a flush draw is a very strong hand that will. But if you have a queen and the other player has nothing, there's really no bad card for you on the turn. So in that case, by not betting, you're just lowering the risk in general through that. Right, you're lowering the volatility of the situation. Let's say he has something like pocket sixes. What happens if you don't bet on the flop? Nothing bad will happen for you, right? If he has something like 10-9, in this case it does matter. You have a 7, 10-9 is danger. But if you had pocket jacks or if you have a queen, there's no danger a 10-9 poses to you. So you could see another card and you could take the hand. I mean, the big point is whether we want to move the hand towards an all-in or not. And anytime we start betting, we could put ourselves in a situation when we happen in an all-in. But we really want to put ourselves towards the all-in path. If you have aces, if you have ace-queen, if you have a very strong hand. But if you have something medium strength, like let's say you had Queen 10 here, and you start betting and he doesn't fold, then you end up in a very big pot, and they could have a queen and all the weaker hands you already folded up. And my big thing here is that if we have Queen 10, we don't necessarily want the big pot. We fold out all the weak hands and then only leave in strong queens and flush draws, which I like their battlefield expression. So in some sense, we want to move forward if our force is very strong. If you have ace queen, you want to get all in. You want a big pot too. If you have aces, you want a big pot. You want to move forward all in.
But if I have aces, so I want to move forward all in. But I think you want me to be a sneaky player with aces, don't you?
No, sneaky is only good if the other player is very aggressive. I guess then they will make a mistake. They will see, oh, you checked, you're weak, let's try to bluff you. Most of your opponents are going to be quite passive unless they have a pair. So no, I don't think you have to necessarily be sneaky with aces because he's not going to fold a queen. Right?
Okay, no, I like what you say, but there's an issue for me. I have to be sneaky with a queen, but I don't have to be sneaky with an ace. And I understand why I should be not sneaky with a 7, but sneaky with a queen. Up to a certain extent, I can get it, that I can take the risk. But now that I even have better, suddenly I have to be sneaky. I don't have to be sneaky anymore. So it's hard for me to understand that the queen, my play must be sneaky, but the ace, my play must be sneaky. Because you think that when you have an ace, he has a queen. And in that case, he wouldn't fold. So there's no point in being sneaky.
Exactly. So the queen isn't the best example. I think something like pocket jacks is a better example. Because if you move forward very strongly with pocket jacks, you just fold out the weaker hands. And there you end up just up against a queen or a flush draw. And that's a position your jacks doesn't want to be in. So in some ways in a battlefield, weak stuff can move forward because they're weak anyway. Like this A7, if you have to fold it, it's not a big deal. It wasn't super strong anyway. And super strong stuff wants to move forward because super strong hand, I think it's obvious why it wants a big pot because it's a big favorite. But the weaker stuff benefits from moving forward because it can get some hands to fold that were posing danger. But often these hands that are right in the middle, hands which are not very weak, but not strong either. So something like pocket jacks here. Another example would be a weak queen. So there's a distinction there that if you have ace queen, I mean, that's very strong on this board. I think it's very unlikely he would have a better hand than ace queen. But if you compare that to something like queen 9 or queen 10, now there is more danger because they could have queen jack, they could have king queen. So if you push these are hands which are fine to stay where they're at. They like how it is. They don't really want to go more towards all in. but they're not very worried about next cards either. So these hands are often the hands that want to stay put in that way, that they're happy with the position. They just, maybe they want to start moving forward later when it's safer, right? Let's say the flop goes check, check, turn goes check, check, and river comes out and it's still safe. Maybe you take a forward move then with your queen 10 or with your pocket jacks. They didn't bet the turn. Nothing scary came on the board. Okay, let's try to make the pot a little bigger and win now something with our jacks or our wheat. But if they start pushing forward too quickly, these medium hands, then it just happens that they fold out weak hand they were beating anyway. So they like get protection against the weaker hands, which they didn't need. And now they also get themselves in more trouble against the queen, against the flush draw, against the good stuff. It is difficult to categorize in hands in this way. I understand that. Yes.
But to recap, with 7, I don't need to be a sneaky player. With pocket jacks, I think it is good to be a sneaky player because it's a middling hand. And with pocket queens, I have also to be a sneaky player. But with pocket aces, I do not have to be a sneaky player anymore. Is that correct? And
Yeah,
you wanted to add,
that's
something.
That's
So-
pretty good. What I wanted to add is, can our hand wait, and does our hand want to wait? So I think here with ace-7, it's quite clear that we don't really want to wait too much because so many bad cards will come. Most likely on the turn and the river, it will get worse for us. So we really don't want to wait too much with our 7. But if we have jacks or if we have a weak queen, it's less likely it will go bad the way the board will come. So our hand can wait a little bit. And these hands benefit from waiting because it's a safer way to play these hands. And then you have the very best hands like aces. That doesn't want to wait. It could wait, but it usually doesn't want to wait because it wants to, it's so strong at that moment that it's not worried if the pot goes all in or gets bigger. But a hand like jacks would be, right? If you bet here, he calls or goes all in, or if you bet again on the turn, jacks wouldn't feel comfortable there. So in some simpler ways, what would feel comfortable for a hand? For jacks, I would say it's quite comfortable if we don't bet here.
Okay, it's very interesting. I have to think about it a lot and I have to train a lot until that gets normal for me and I can do it.
Good. There will be other hands we will review and they will show you this similar concept from a different perspective. And then we get to discuss it again. And then I think it will get clearer as we go through a few examples.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Thank you. Do we look at one more hand?
Yes.
Oops. Now, since we've talked about aces, we get an ace. And I don't know why I marked this one, because normally it's easy to play.
Yeah, I do like this gamble. We're a big favorite against anything. So I would answer this hand in this sense that will we get a better situation if we fold? And I think it's quite unlikely, right? Aces is 80% favorite against anything, sometimes even more than 80%. And the reward is massive to win 70 big blinds. So with ace, you should be quite happy to go all in. And yes, it will be the last hand of your tournament 15-20% of the time, but that is acceptable as 80-85% of the time you get a very large victory through it.
Yeah, for me, I marked it because you always say I shouldn't when I'm deep stacked. And yeah, but in this time it's an exception because I have 80% chance of winning.
What I mean by that gamble is really those 50-50 scenarios, right? Where let's say you have ace queen, the other guy has pocket nines and stuff like that. Or you think let's say you have pocket jacks and you're thinking, well, maybe has queens, maybe has tens, maybe has ace king, but I'm not sure. So when it's like 50-50, that's a gamble. And a lot of people find that as an excuse to play the hand that, well, it's not bad, right? It's 50-50, so I should go for it. As some gamble is unavoidable, right? In poker, it's very rare that you have 100% chance. So if your winning chances are very, very high, in this case, 4 times out of 5 you win it, then even though it's still a gamble, that's an acceptable gamble. What wouldn't be acceptable is if you're 51% favorite, they're 49, and now you're like, well, I'm a 1% favorite, I think I should gamble. So yes. So
Okay.
sometimes it's I guess this attitude towards gambling, that when the opponent forces you to gamble, they go all in. I don't want for that scenario. I'm not seeking for that. I would have liked to see the flop and win in a safer way. But when it's forced on me, then if my hand is in a very strong position, I will accept their gamble. But I'm not, a lot of people in poker are happy when it happens. So I like that even with aces, you should take it as kind of sort of that you're forced into this gamble. I mean, you're not forced into you could fold, which I don't think would be good, but it's just this mindset to take it as a necessary part of the game, not something to seek out for. And I think a lot of poker players have this mental issue where they're happy to be in these scenarios, but it should just be part of the game. It shouldn't cause too much enjoyment. Like you shouldn't feel like you're just seeking out those situations. That's a little bit, well, that's a gambler's mindset I don't know if I expressed this well, what I mean, this sentiment about.
Yeah, I get the idea of the sentiment, but I shouldn't seek situation where I can gamble and I have only 52% chance of winning. Those situations, I should not seek them. That's what you just said.
Yes.
Yeah. For me, that's not what is hard. Actually, yeah, it might be one day if I play for more, maybe, I don't know. But even then, I don't think it will be hard. For me, what is hard is to keep going when I either make stupid decisions or the variant just turns against me. To keep going, because it exposes me to pain. When I lose, it exposes me to pain. When I see my bankroll dropping and dropping and dropping, it exposes me to pain. And then it's hard to keep on going and finding the energy to not give up, That is harder for me than just say, okay, let's gamble. I know that that's stupid mindset and I don't want to have it. But keeping going when things do not turn in your favor, it's hard. Because you think, I'm trying since a long time and my results aren't satisfying, so it's hard. It's like, look, there's a person you have to watch. She's called Dakota. Do you know Dakota? Do you know who she is?
Sounds like a singer, but I'm not sure.
No, she's an MMA fighter, I think.
Okay.
And she's a woman, but it's really impressive to see her because she's a white woman out of England. Well, she had origins, Slavic origins. I don't know, Russia, or I don't think it was Estonia, Bulgaria, or whatever. But she has some Slavic origins. But anyways, she's a big favorite right now. And she faces very tough woman, with big muscles, sometimes black keys and so on. But she shows extreme strength and extreme courage, and she never gives up. And she has a mindset of really killing them in the ring, and shows no mercy. And that's something very, very, very rare to see. But it's quite easy for her because she was trained her entire life to do that, and she's one of the best right now. So then it's hard, you get a feedback, you get some nice feelings out of it because you keep winning, making a lot of money, everybody likes you and so on. But take another person. She tries to do the same, but she's not as good. And she just gets knocked out and knocked out. Well, how many knocks out can you take until you give up? That's the question. How many times will you come back and do it when you just end up on the floor in a hospital bed when it's over?
Yeah, I think it takes self-awareness also to know when when it's smart to take a break, right? Sometimes if you know you're feeling emotional and that you will likely not play your best, then it is a good idea to take a break. I mean, you could play, but if you feel like you're unable to leave the past behind and make peace with it, then it is a good time for a break, right? It's easy to say, just don't forget about the last tournament, just focus on the current decision. Sometimes people are better off just taking a break and coming back when they're in a good mindset. I wanted to add also with the gambling mindset, a better example, which is, if we have 10 big blinds, and we're at the end of the tournament, or maybe even heads up game, and your chart says to you, you can go all in. Another thing you should always ask there is, will the other players fold? Because really, if your chart says you can go all in for 10 big blinds, but you don't think they will fold, maybe it's not a good idea to go all in then, right? That can leave the impression for many people that we want to be all in there. But actually we don't. When we go all in with 10 big blinds, unless we have a very strong hand, we usually want everyone to fold, and then we just win the blinds and the antes without any risk. So that's part where a gambler can come out of us. Like, you're in a heads-up match, the other player is, you think, very likely to call your all in, and you have something like 10-6 suited, and your chart says you can go all in. But if they don't fold, it's not a good scenario. It's the benefit of 10-6 is when they fold a lot of the time, then you get away with that. They hopefully would fold some queen, some king cards, and then it's good for your 10-6. So that's something to keep in mind with going all ins, that we're for a fold most of the time in these scenarios. That's where the gambler's mindset can come out. But for what you were talking about, yeah, I guess it's just the more you do it, the easier it gets, because you get used to it, right? The more you play, the more you're used to losing, to winning, to everything. Like, winning will make you less happy because it's happened so many times, and losing will also hurt less because you know that you've gone through it and you can come back again. And then the biggest thing I will always try is to try to focus on one decision at a time, because it's too much. And how would it help, right? You play a hand and now you're thinking about, well, I was unlucky last hand. I lost last 3 tournaments. These could all just be distractions. So in that sense, I think it's also true in life, right? That if we just take like this moment, what can I do? What can I take? What action can I take right now or this day to make things even a little bit forward? Even if sometimes if you think about all the things you can't do or have gone badly or too much, so it's sometimes like to think less. And by thinking less, I guess I mean thinking, when I play poker, I try to just think about that one hand that I'm playing. And it's sort of like nothing else matters. Like it doesn't matter, like it matters in some sense, but the most important is I just try to play that hand well. And that's the advice I always say, that how do good results happen? How does someone win 1,000 hands? Well, if you break it down, winning 100 tournaments is just winning one tournament 100 times. And winning one tournament is just winning like 15 hands that happened during that tournament. So, and winning those 15 hands, it's just doing your best decision each of these situations you were in. So in some sense, it's easier to just try to focus on that decision you have to do. You have 3 buttons: fold, call, raise, how much to do it, and to try to do every time it as perfectly as you can, and then leave everything else to hope, right? It's like running in that sense, that what can you really control when you run? You can only control your next step that you're taking. And if you take one step well and you do it in a nice way, then you can take another, and then suddenly you've taken 1,000 steps and run all this long time. So
Yeah,
I
no.
don't know if it
But
helps.
the human mind is always drifting, and that's why they recommend meditation, just so you can learn to focus. And when you tell me that you only concentrate on the hand you're playing, that's actually a form of meditation. If you forget about all the rest and you only focus on that, it's a form of meditating on something, I would say. Okay. And I want to say another thing. You know the French expression.
Yes.
Well, you pointed out one of my weaknesses. I don't have a gambling mindset until I reach 14 big blind. And then maybe I still can keep my gambling mindset in check. But once I reach heads up, I gamble a lot, you know, because I find some safety in gambling in that situation. And for me, even if you say it's not the case, it's always a gamble when you are heads up, because I can have a very nice card like pocket jacks, and the other one has not a lot of big blinds left, and he plays something really bad like 4-8 offsuit, but he makes 2 pairs and he wins. So there's always a gamble. Now that's a gamble you want to take, I know, but you cannot know in when most decisions are taken before even seeing the flop. How can you know what is best to do? For me, it's heads up is always 50% chance of making it or not. And if you're good and you use the charts like the pusher and caller charts, well, then your chance is a little higher, maybe 52 or 55, or I don't know, but a little higher, But to me, it's always a huge gamble when you're sitting heads up with somebody. So that's why in that situation, I feel security in gambling as long as I follow my charts. But we already talked about it. You still, yeah. But that's the moment where I start gambling. But it's just my ignorance. It's not that I want to gamble. It's just that I don't know how to beat the other guy in another way.
Yes, it's true. There will be just by it will happen that the shorter, if you have 40 or 10 big blinds, the less you have, the more likely it is that you will be forced to gamble. But I think the important mindset is still to be that, okay, I'm sort of begrudgingly now gambling because there isn't any other option. But there should be this, it should still be, I know why it's like this heads up, because you already guaranteed second place. So in some ways, even if you lose, it's not so bad. But ideally, it still would be that even if you have 5 big blinds, you try to make the best out of those 5 big blinds. And if you go all in with the utmost care, with as much deliberation as possible. You really ask yourself, is there any other way? Is there some safer way I could? And if the answer is no, then you go for it. And like you said, if hopefully you get it in good, so you're a favorite, and even a 52% is better than to have 40 or 30% chance. But like you said, sometimes the other guy could also have jacks themselves, and you did everything correctly, you went all in ace-5, they have jacks, and what can you do? So it's more difficult then to not get into this habit of I'm just gambling, because it happens so often. So that's maybe the danger but it's something that you have to find the control in yourself, that even if you're heads up and it's so many pots go all in, that you're still trying to seek out the ways. So you're not, I don't know a good way to say it, like you're not enjoying it too much to just be in that gamble. That's also why I did recommend heads up to limp more, right? To min raise more, because these are ways where it does pose some risks, right? You raise, you limp in, they could make a good hand and now beat you. But over the long run, it still leaves you more opportunities. But if you're all in, then if it doesn't go your way, then you don't have more opportunities. So in some ways, it's part of the game. I think that it's just this attitude, right? To not just want. Yeah, I don't have like the good words to say it. I see it as a mindset thing. Whether you take it because you're like, my best decision here is to gamble with this hand, that is fine. That is fine if and that can happen often in a heads up match, if that's the best decision. But it's a different thing when it's like sometimes people find excuses from chart. somewhere deep inside, you know that against this player, I don't think it's a good idea for whatever reason. Maybe they're too loose. Maybe they don't. Sometimes this can happen that, or let's say they go all in and your chart says you can call their all in with your queen nine. But somewhere inside you're like, well, but this guy doesn't know charts. He goes all in. That means he has an ace or a pocket pair. And then if someone calls because chart says you should call, that is like wanting to gamble or giving too much power to the chart there. You should still be like, chart says I can call this hand 11 big blinds. I have 10 big blinds, but I don't think it's a good time to call this hand. I really feel like the other player has a much better hand and I would have better chances to not gamble and moving forward. So it's this also to learn when to say no to a gamble, even when it's allowed by a chart in a way.
Yeah, I agree, Norman. And the example you give, it makes a lot of sense. Because the chart says I have 10 big blind and the chart says I have 11, as you said. But in that case, the difference is only small. And if I think the guy only goes all in with a very tight range, then maybe I shouldn't look at my caller chart and still don't take the gamble. I know that. Up to there, I can follow. But look, I was also in a situation where my opponent had not much left and he wasn't showing a lot of aggression. And suddenly he goes all in with 3-2 suited or something like this. And yeah, of course I should have called according to my caller chart. But I was very hesitant because I thought maybe it's more smart to not call because I was ahead, but not that much and not risk half of my stack. And I still said, okay, let's go with the caller chart and see what happens. And he had a very bad hand. And I won, So sometimes they do something stupid or I don't know what. And
the question is always how often it happens, right? Why you had this sense? Because likely 5 times out of 6, they would have a very strong hand there. So you see, you have to be very careful with, if I took every time my opponent showed me a stupid hand like 2-3, then I would be all in every hand, right?
Yeah, but the thing is, I was expecting a fight. I was expecting I had decent hands, but I was expecting a fight, I was not expecting him to show me some crappy hands.
Exactly. In that, it might be a sign of a gambler's mindset to go into that fight when you think it's going to be 50-50 at best. And you're right, sometimes you might make a bad fold, like you would never fold if you see 2-3. But it's also to accept that. I think in poker, one thing that's part of being a good player is sometimes you allow yourself to be bluffed because it's too risky to always try to be a hero or to check if to keep the other guy honest, right? If every time someone went all in, that would be very costly all those times when they don't have something to do. So
yeah, and most of the time I get it correct. But for me, it's very hard with a heads up because all of the reasons I gave you, and on top of that, it's not even sure that I'm ahead. So I could be under a lot of pressure. And even if I'm a little ahead, I need enough power to negotiate the flop, the turn, and the river. And often I don't feel like I have that power. I have the time to waste, the money to waste, and try to see what happens. And I know also that they have tendency of being very aggressive. So they have tendency, even if they have nothing, to bet on the flop or the turn or the river, even if they have nothing, just to scare me off. And and most of the time I don't want to take the risk, so I fold. I think instead of making my life so hard, just follow the charts and afterwards make yourself a tea or something.
Well, we'll try to review more heads-up hands in the future. So we'll try to work on that so you'll feel more comfortable in those scenarios.
Okay. Great, Norman. I think we had a long discussion and an interesting one today, and we can call it a day if you agree.
Yes, sounds good. I'm gonna now go for a run.
That sounds good. I did one before we met, and I really enjoyed it. So that's always great. How many runs do you make a week?
Depends on a week. I guess on average, maybe 2.
And for how long do you go?
Probably an hour usually.
Okay, that's nice. Okay, enjoy your run. I hope the weather is fine and you get some sun. And I'll see you next week. Thanks a lot, Norman.
See you.
Bye-bye.